Welcome back to Ales and Fails Miniatures. I hope everyone enjoyed their holiday. Giving thanks, I just want to thank you guys for all being here. It really means a lot to us here at Ales and Fails. But without further ado, let's get into it. Pretty excited, we've gotten a lot done. And I'm ready to show you guys that in this video. We got the doors done, the drawers done, all the handles put on. The next step will just be sanding and staining it, but for right now, let's get into the build. So the next step in this build was to make the actual cabinet doors themselves. I did this just using 1x4s. I thought that was probably the simplest way to go about it. I marked them at a 45-degree angle using a square, and then just very precisely cut them on the saw. I did have to set my saw, I think it was like 41 5/8, something weird like that, because my saw does not exactly have 45-degree angle on it. But all I did was set it, make sure that everything was connecting on a couple pieces of scrap wood, and then I cut the actual pieces for the door out. The biggest thing for me is to make sure that the top and bottom and left and right are the exact same size all the way around, or else you're going to end up with some wonky corners. But once all those were cut, I just put some pocket holes in the very edge of it because I was going to put a dado of sorts. I'm not sure what the actual name is, but basically just end up routering it out to where I could fit the backing on and it would be flat all across the backside of the cabinet door. I did this by setting the fence on my router table to the depth that I wanted it, both back and depth-wise, actually going into the piece of wood. And then I ran all 8 pieces through here. That way they would all be the exact same. Once they were all cut, I moved the fence forward and ran them through again. Here you can see exactly what I was going for. I basically just cut to the depth of the piece of ply that I was using. That way it would fit in the back and be level all the way across. But once that was all done, I glued this, clamped it together, and then put the pocket screws in. While I waited for these cabinet doors to dry, it was time to start messing with the appliques. So I kind of just freehanded the whole thing and went with what I thought would look nice. It isn't an ideal science here, but you know, I'm doing something off the top of my head, off of a drawing that I made. So I just kind of went back through and redrew it onto a piece of cardboard that later I could cut out and use as stencils. And obviously I start with pencils so that I can erase it and do it over again if it's not quite perfect. And then once I'm actually happy with it, I went back with a Sharpie to make sure that my lines were all correct. And now that that's done, it is time to actually cut out all of those and then trace them onto my frames and cut out the frames. Once it was cut out with the jigsaw, I went back with a sander just to make sure everything was nice and smooth. I didn't want any jagged bits or any imperfections that would make it look weird. The next bit on here, I wanted this to be a rounded edge, so I just took it to my router table and very carefully went around the entire piece, giving it that rounded edge with that router bit. I was very happy with the way this turned out. It was very smooth. I did have to go back and sand it a little bit more. Obviously, it's almost a never-ending process when you're doing something like this, is the sanding. But now it was just time to cut the backing out, and I did this by setting the table saw and cutting both sides out, and then setting it the other direction and cutting them again. That way they were both the exact same size and would fit into the back of that perfectly. Just like that, a nice, perfect, snug fit. The last step here was to go around the outside edge of the cabinet doors and put another beveled edge on it. This one I did a more of a fancy look. You can see it in the back there. It has more detail to it. I think it just looks really nice. And then I just went through and glued the backs on. I tried not to over glue it here. I just put a small bead right in the corner and then went through and spread it out. Obviously you want enough to where it sticks nicely, but you also don't want it squeezing out the front, or you're gonna have problems later when you try to stain it. Once I set it in there, I put another piece of wood, and then I put the planer on there just because it was one of the heaviest things I have that actually fit, just to help hold that down while it was gluing. And I personally think these turned out really nice. I was very excited with the way they look. I think they're going to look amazing once they're stained on them. And again, I just went back, like I said before, and sanding never ends. So you just sand down the back to make them as even as possible, make sure everything's smooth, and then go in and actually wood fill the front, back, just anywhere where there's any little tiny gaps. It doesn't do a whole lot, but it just makes it all super smooth and gives it a very finished look. Now on to the appliques. This was probably the most difficult thing I've done while woodworking. Again, I am not a professional, very much so an amateur, and I kept breaking them and trying to figure out how exactly I was going to do this, because I was using pine rather than something a little bit harder, which would have been nice. I had to plane this down to make it the same thickness as the front of that cabinet, or else it would have been sticking way outside of the door frame. So I had to plane them down to very thin, and once I did that, I just took the stencils, cut them out, and traced them onto this. The first bit here, I actually made the mistake of trying to do them with just the jigsaw and sander. I ended up going back and using the ones that I made here as my stencil. That way I could use my router table, made it a little bit easier, and I think they turned out a lot nicer. And you can see here, this is how I actually used it as a stencil. I pre-drilled some holes in it, put some screws through, some very short screws so it didn't go all the way through, and that held it on there very, very nicely. And then I could just use my router table to cut out the rest of it, which made this a lot easier. But I will say I kept breaking pieces, and again, just was not the most simple way to go about it, but with basic tools it was all I had, so just had to do the best I could. And anytime I was cutting out one of these, I made sure to go in with sandpaper and make them as smooth as possible before using them as my stencil. But just like the rest of it, I just kept repeating this process until I had all my stencils, and then traced them over onto the other pieces of wood by screwing them on and then using my router table to cut them out again. I did end up liking it this way a little bit better because I could put them all on there at once, which made it to where I could actually grain match all of these pieces, and I think that really gave it a good look. Once they were all screwed on, it's as simple as using the jigsaw to cut them out. This just takes off any extra bit so the router doesn't have to work as hard to actually cut out the individual pieces, because that's what I feel like was probably part of the issue, is I was trying to cut too much out at once. So I just made it to where the router has a lot less meat to eat. And as you can see here, I just was really taking my time, going as slow as possible to try to make the most smooth cuts I could. and I think that also helped a little bit. But once all of these were cut out, I had to go back in with the router table again and put that same bevel that I put on the outside of the cabinet doors on all of these appliques as well. And while you're watching that, a quick tip: make sure to tighten down your router bit before using it. Do not get distracted. There was a point where I ruined a couple of these because I apparently didn't tighten it down enough, and that got a little sketchy. So again, just make sure that you always tighten that down as much as possible. But with safety tips out of the way, basically just glued them on at this point. I put them in place, traced around them to really make sure that I had lines to go off of. I didn't want to do this freehand. So again, I just put them on there, traced around them with pencil, and then glued them in place using my lines as my marker of where they need to go. Just like before, I just put a lot of weight on them. I did do this a little bit differently. I used some 1x4s to spread the weight out as much as I could to make sure I'm hitting all these different little pieces, and I didn't want them on the frame just in case that these actually sat a little bit lower than the frame. I just wanted all the weight directly on the appliques themselves. And on this second one that I'm about to show you, I did it a little bit smarter where I put the boards down and then put a larger piece of wood over top. That just helps distribute the weight evenly compared to just using the feet of the planer. Because if I had something else, I would have. Weights are probably the best thing to use, but I think these turned out really nice. And yeah, I did have to go back in a couple of areas and clamp them down and re-glue a little bit just to make sure everything was nice and tight. But after that, it was time to put on the handles, which I just marked them out, drilled them out, and then put them on. I'm not going to go super into depth on how to mark out handles and everything because I'm not a professional woodworker. There's plenty of professionals out there that make videos on how to do this. I watched a couple and kind of did it my own way and it worked out, but I would highly recommend probably using a better method than I did. But I really think these turned out good and they look great. The next thing I did here was put the handles onto the drawer fronts. I did this by marking from corner to corner with a pencil using a long straight edge, and then using my jig to make sure that my hole was as straight as possible. And I also used that long straight edge, went up and down just to make sure that they're all centered together. They're not off to the left or right or going at an angle. And these are super easy because they're only one screw. Once your hole's drilled, you just put the screw in it and then tighten the handle on. And the last bit here, I would just highly recommend buying hinges that are meant for your project. I ended up going with these because I really liked the look of them, but couldn't find ones that quite worked for my project. So I did have to cut these off. They are meant to actually go on the inside of the cabinet, along with the door being actually in the hole compared to where mine is on the face. So I did have to cut this back piece off and use them incorrectly, but it seems to work pretty well. And again, same thing. I'm not going to go super into depth about this. I had to watch a lot of videos on how to get these hinges on, and I still had to go my own way with it because nothing would work because, well, they're not actual hinges that are meant to be used this way. But I just really made sure everything was even from left to right. Still had to redo the right one because I was a little bit low. But either way, it worked out in the end. They look really nice. Just take it slow, make sure your measurements are correct, and I really, really like the way these turned out. One little tip I will say, with hinges that go directly up against the door, I would recommend putting a small shim in there just to where they fit correctly, because they might end up binding a little bit if not. One little solution to this, I will end up going back and sanding them down to make that not as much of an issue, but one little solution, I wanted to either way put latches on this to where when you shut the door, it was actually held in place, and these are very simple. Again, just hold them in place, screw them on one side, and then I closed the door, marked out where the holes needed to go on the door, and screwed those in as well. And these work amazingly, and and I think everything just turned out really, really nice. I'm very excited to see the final product of this, and yeah, these just, man, everything just turned out way better than I thought it would. Alright guys, if you have made it this far in the video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Really appreciate it. It helps out the channel a lot. I'm excited. I think this thing is turning out absolutely beyond what I could have imagined. All we have to do at this point, add a couple of D20s down here on the circles of the doors, and then get it sanded and stained. I'm very excited to see the finished product of this, and then get it all put together. I think I'm going to buy a walnut slab for the actual tabletop of it. I'm very excited for that as well, so make sure to check out the next video when it comes out. Cheers.